Hey guys, we want to thank Cap City Tees for sponsoring today's episode. That's right, Cap City Tees, the #1 printing company in Sacramento. Well, at least in our hearts. Cap City Tees is an amazing company putting out amazing quality at, most importantly, amazing prices. They are in line with any major retailer out there. Now, if you're in need of getting a shirt screen printed or embroidered, whether that's your local soccer team or basketball team or volleyball team or all the way up to corporate clothing, Cap City Tees is the place to go. So if you're in need or if you're in want, reach out to Cap City Tees at capcitytees.com or capcitytees@gmail.com. That's capcitytees@gmail.com. Welcome to the Hard Money Show, where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. It is a good day when we can jump on the podcast and talk about some real estate. It's been a couple weeks since we put out some episodes. That's okay. I got sick, but we've rescheduled to a better time to where I can make sure that I'm putting out things that are of high quality and we're giving the appropriate respect to the people who come on this podcast, who give up their time. And, I just want to make sure we're putting out the best things possible. And so I'm very excited to be able to be back on the mic. Speaking of the mic, I upgraded. I'm really excited. I had a Rode condenser mic that I really liked. I think it's the NT1A. Really great mic, but it kind of obstructed my face a little bit. I could not find the right angle for it, and it didn't sound necessarily the best. I mean, it sounds pretty good. It's a $200 and something mic, so it's not a cheap mic, but I wanted to get the kind of creme de la creme of mics, and so I did upgrade to the Shure SM7B, and I did add the cloud booster on it, and it's sounding pretty good in my ears. I don't know about you guys. I hope it is. I hope it was worth the money, but I like generally the way that it looks a little bit better because it's not obstructing my face. And why does that matter? You guys don't see my face. Nobody sees my face because this is a podcast. Well, the reason why is because this season we've been recording all of the episodes and I want to get them up. I'd like this to be in a video format as well. I was really excited to hear that. Oh man, I totally went blank. I was really excited to hear that Spotify has a video version now. I'm going to check that out and see if that's a good place for this to end up. But that's the reason why, right? I've been working on getting our camera angles set up. And everything else is looking pretty good. And so that's generally where we're at. But I diverge. I digress. Why don't we go ahead and move on to today's information? This is a solo podcast. The next one coming out will be very good. I'm excited. I'm going to have a couple guests on there. And so today, what I really wanted to talk about and what I've been giving a lot of consideration is there's some key things that you should know about real estate. Now, these are, things that I've kind of read online. These are ideas that maybe I've discussed with other realtors, other lenders, my broker, or maybe just things that I myself through this real estate journey have decided are important. So we're going to jump into these. They're no in particular order of importance, but I just thought it would be a cool, podcast to really do this. And if you're looking to get into real estate, you're looking, or you're in real estate, or you're looking to buy or sell real estate, these are good things to consider regardless. So first one, a home is worth what a buyer is willing to pay. I know this is really hard for a lot of people to hear. I get it. You love your home. You put a lot of work into it. There's memories, right? I get it. The thing is that the market will dictate what your property is worth. And this is so prevalent right now over the last 6 months, right? I don't know when people are going to listen to this podcast. It could be in 20 years. So let's just say we're in 2023. It's March right now. And so count back 6 months, property values started to drop a little bit towards the end of last year, and they're continuing to drop into this year, into the first quarter and the last quarter of last year. And so this has been really difficult for people because they were seeing properties around their house maybe being bought for 500, 550,000, and they're like, "Oh, that's great. Like maybe I can sell my property and do that." And they waited 6 months, and now those properties are not worth 500,000, right? They might be worth 450, they might be worth 420. And a good example of this is, I just did a loan, and on that loan there was two houses that closed and recorded the day that the appraisal was being done on the property we did. And because of those, the value of the property that we were doing went down $30,000. I know it's crazy, but that's the way the market works. And so you have to understand that as much as you want your property to sell for a certain amount, or you really want, you think this house is worth less than it is when you're trying to buy it, the value is the value. It's dictated by the market. I think for the most part, appraisers do a pretty good job of, aligning what's going on in the market with what is being put on paper and sent over. And so definitely something to consider. Try not to fight your realtor on this too much. They look at the comps that are out there. They try to help you guys put in offers that make sense. And ultimately, we got to try to do the best we can with what we have. And so I know that could be a tough one to swallow, but it is what it is, right? So definitely keep that in mind. All right. Next one we're going to talk about are upgrades. Oh boy, a lot of people do not understand this. I saw this investment video, or maybe it was an article that I read or something, but it was essentially this person had put $100,000 into their remodel and wanted to sell and didn't understand why the house wasn't worth $100,000 more because they had put $100,000 into the remodel. It is not a dollar for dollar improvement. You have to understand that improvements to the house have different values depending on where you do it. And that's mostly because people value different parts of the house differently, right? And the type of improvements you do might not always be worth it, right? It might not be worth putting in, that $20,000 marble countertops that you want to put in because the area that you're in really doesn't have anything like that. Or maybe that's just not really going to add a lot of value to your house, right? Really, what adds value to your house is really adding square footage. But yeah, you can do, and there's value and then there's perceived value. And what that means is painting the house, and let's say, watering your lawn so it's green, making sure your pool is blue when people come and look at it to buy. That's perceived value, right? It looks like, oh, like everything's painted nicely. So, everything looks like newer or whatever. The grass is green, so we know this is taken care of. The pool is blue, we know it's taken care of. So there's this perceived value in it. And you can do that by changing out, cabinet fixtures, maybe putting in a different mirror, things like that. But that's not real value, right? Like adding a roof on is real value, but it's not a dollar for dollar valuation. And I'm not necessarily the best person to tell you kind of what those increases are, but it's important to understand that, because if you're trying to sell your house and you're planning on doing these renovations to it or this rehab or remodel, it might be good to talk to a realtor and, talk to some people who understand how these values are incurred and where it's going to make sense to actually put your money to sell this to get the most that you can out of it. And so that's really critical. I just want people to really kind of understand that a little bit, because it's a bit of a headache, and it's unfortunate too, because I get it. You put a lot of money in, you want to get as much as you're going to get out of it, but that may not be always be the case. And then, of course, there's the other side of it where it's like, hey, you're putting up a completely trashed looking house. Maybe you're not going to get the best, but maybe we should paint it. Maybe we should redo the floors or put new carpet in or something like that, right? Because it's the perceived value as well. Certain things need to look a certain standard for people to think that this property hasn't been abused. So keep that in mind. Another thing to consider is the cleanliness of your property, right? Especially if you're going to be selling this property. But I will say, it's really, as a realtor, or at least when I was doing real estate actively, it's really tough to go into a property when it's dirty, there's dirt around, things haven't been clean, and, you know, try to sell that property. Now, it's not my job to sell your property, right? We're working with the buyers, but you want it to make it easier for the buyer's agents, right? You want them to be able to walk in your house and be like, "This is the coolest house I ever seen. This house is clean. It's well taken care of. I don't see any major issues with it." And so clean the house, right? Make it like uncluttered. Get really, I think this is important, right? Doesn't necessarily need to be a deep clean, especially if you haven't vacated the property yet, but make it presentable, right? Like pretty presentable. Like clean off the toothpaste from your bathroom. Put those toothbrushes away. Don't leave half-eaten food and bowls of cereal on your counters. Cleanliness. It's important. I wish that I could say more about this because I feel so much about it. But I just want to leave it there. People want to come into clean houses. They want to move into clean houses. So do your best to present it that way. All right. So on the road of cleanliness is, because when I talk about cleanliness, I'm mostly talking about inside your house. But sometimes people forget about the outsides. And I've had this before where people are like, well, the house is in nice condition, blah, but the backyard, it needs a little work. That's what I think probably a realtor's best friend as far as verbiage goes. It needs a little bit of work. No, it doesn't need a little work. It needs about $10,000, $20,000 of landscaping is what you're really saying. But, it is what it is. The backyard, you can sometimes get away with that because people can't see it. But I will tell you what, curb appeal matters. The front of your house, right? A good example of this is when we bought our house, right? We were buying, summertime, it's hot, and we really didn't give it much thought. But, in the Northern California area, gets very hot and grass dies. Not a lot of people do. Plus, we're in a drought state most of the time. And so we really have to be cognizant of how much we're watering our lawn. While we're looking around, the lawn here was really green. It was taken very good care of. And, it made it nice. There's trees around and they're blooming and everything looks nice. It was really appealing to come to the house. So when we get into contract, I'm walking into the house to do like another inspection, and there's a guy doing the lawn, and I'm like, "Hey, like, are you the owner?" And he's like, "No." He's like, "I do the lawn here. Like, I live down the road. I do a couple lawns in the community." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And so we're just talking a little bit, and you let people talk, and he's essentially like, "Yeah, I'm watering the lawn like 3 times a day. I'm mowing it and weeding and doing everything once a week." And it's because they really wanted it to look nice. And now that we've lived here, the lawn doesn't look as great. And the reason why is because in order for it to stay that nice, it really does need to be watered 3 times a day, maybe even more, depending on how windy it is out here, and things like that. And so it's a really interesting how these impressions, of when you're first coming up to the house matters. So make sure it looks nice. Make sure your lawns are groomed, they're watered. People can be instantly turned off, and first impressions matter, because if they come and they see that your lawn is not, doing particularly well, they're going to think, well, what other things are there in this house that are not doing well? And there might be, plenty of things that are great, but in the back of their head, they're going to think, well, something's hiding because I can't see everything, right? So definitely keep that in mind. I will say, I should have put this in the cleanliness part, but um, pets. If you have pets in the house, air the house out, get rid of the pet odors, don't leave clutter around. I mean, it's so important for this. It just kind of popped in my head. I have a dog who's hanging out today. So, make sure that you guys are kind of doing that, right? All right. Another thing to consider, right? Cheap fixes. Now, we talked about this a little bit, but I kind of want to talk about this a little bit more, right? Because these are the sort of things that can make a big difference. When I say cheap fix, I mean like a cheap fix. I have been into houses where you go into, let's say there's the living room, the dining room, a second dining room, and there's different light bulbs in each of those dining rooms. And those light bulbs are, one's a white, one's a yellow. They're changing the colors of those rooms. And it doesn't seem like a big deal. I mean, it's not a big deal, but aesthetically, it really changes the feel of that house, right? And this is such an easy thing as somebody trying to sell their house and somebody to pay attention who's trying to buy the house. What does that room look like? And I look at this more because I do the real estate photography, I do the real estate videography, and you have to change the settings in your camera when you have these lighting differences because it makes it easier in post when you want to match everything up and try to have continuity throughout the entire filming process. And so go through, change out your light bulbs, make them all the same so everything is looking good, especially if they're going to put photos up, everything is shooting good, make it easy for them. And these are the sort of little things that you can do, right? Little paint touch-ups, changing the light bulbs, changing the door handles, changing the facets, even things that are even maybe a little bit more like changing out like faucets or things like that. But in the scheme of real estate, in the scheme of remodeling, these are very small differences that you can make in making this house presentable and, getting better offers. Now, these are things to look at if you're a buyer and maybe you don't want to get persuaded by those sort of things. But I think if people go through that sort of effort, to me, it kind of says, well, maybe they care a little bit more about this house, right? So something to consider. Now, when we're talking about kind of the real estate process and things like that, things that you can kind of should consider, understand that in the real estate transaction, everything is negotiable. A lot of people don't fully understand this or think about this because most realtors will kind of go traditional and they'll be like, well, hey, you want to buy this house? Okay, I'm going to write up the contract. And then be like, we're going to keep the stove, microwave, and refrigerator, right? Or maybe even not the refrigerator because sometimes people want to take those with them. But typically like the stove and, the dishwasher or whatever. But that doesn't have to be the case. You can write into these contracts that you want to keep the refrigerator, you want to keep the blinds, you want to keep the furniture, you want to keep every single piece. I want to keep the pencil that's in that drawer in this house. Everything is negotiable. Now, the more difficult you make it might, turn off the buyer or the seller from wanting to do that. But on either side of it, right, you can negotiate back and forth. And there's this story that goes around. I'm not really even sure where I heard it, but essentially they write up this contract. They want to buy this house. And they thought that the chandelier that they really liked in this house was going to be part of the deal, but it was never written in the contract. And it's not fixed to the property, so it doesn't need to stay or have to stay. And so once it closed, the seller took that with them, and then the buyer showed up and they were really mad that that chandelier was not there. And now that I remembered, I'm pretty sure I heard this in my when I was learning to become a real estate agent. And either way, and so understand that there's a lot of negotiables that you can have in there. And a good example of that was when we were buying our house. The what was it? The pool cleaner, like the thing that sweeps the bottom of the pool, was stolen, I believe. And it was obviously no fault of ours, not our house, but we essentially, the owner, when we agreed that they were going to replace it, right? Because that was what we wanted as part of the house, because we don't want to go rebuy that. Like, it's already there. And so that's good to go. Now, maybe the fact that somebody stole that should have told us that that was a problem, but things like this happen. It's not a big deal. And so we had that replaced, right? So there's things that you can negotiate on these. Be diligent, really understand what you want and you don't want. Typically, like I said, dishwasher, oven, stove, those things are, they're good. You're gonna have them or whatever. But if there's something more specific in the house, and I think furnitures is a good one, or like if they have nice blinds up or they have nice curtains up, that sort of stuff, you can negotiate it. So good to know. Now, we talked about, the negotiation, things like that. But another thing that's really important in real estate in general is time. And I don't think enough people give consideration to this. I've been talking to my realtors and coaching them up a little bit and talking about why our system that we run here, it's very time oriented. It's about, relieving time on the front end so we can be very strong and effective on the back end. Communication etiquette on how to reach out to people and how to be effective communicator and how that's done through time, right? Making sure that you're replying in a professional time. And typically that's within 24 hours, but depending on the closer you get to a transaction, the more available you need to be, right, to answer these phone calls. And so this is important for realtors, but this is important for sellers too, because they often forget that most of the time they're the reason that time gets messed up, right? It is very rare that, let's say that I'm doing lending, that it is my fault that we would run behind on time, right? And yeah, maybe that sounds a little arrogant, but that's the truth, right? I understand the time processes. I give buffer time, and I even give buffer time for clients and understanding they have jobs and careers and things like that. But you would be surprised with the amount of people that say they will get you a document tonight and send it 3 days later, right? And we've just lost 3 days in that process. And so it's important and for everybody in this transaction that these are the sort of things where you set a deadline, you say, we're going to get this done in 30 days. Understand 30 days is not a lot of time when you consider that there's a lot of processes in purchasing and selling a house. So, be cognizant of that. Make sure that you are working with your realtor, with your loan officer. They're working with all the people they need to be working with to get this done on time. And then not only kind of in the process, but understand, like I was saying before, that there's different parts of the year that are perhaps better times to buy. And so these are really important things. I think that could be a really interesting podcast. I think it's well known that a lot of people buy properties, list properties when the weather's better, right? That would be, kind of going into the spring, we get a bump going into summer. But I like that. But also, I think there's a lot of value in looking in properties in the wintertime when it's raining and you can see leaks and real problems that are going to come up on these properties. And so definitely something to consider, right? Time around the process, but also time around through the year that you're going to list the property or buy a property. And a lot of times I find that people are in a place where they're like, well, I'm ready. But, if you can plan it, that's a really good place to be. Now this kind of leads us into understanding that if you're going to buy a property, you're going to sell a property. If you're looking for an investment property, you need to be considering location. Your realtor should be evaluating this. It's one of the things that we do, right? What is important to you? Do you need to live close to a grocery store? Do you need to live close to doctor's offices? Do your kids need to be in this school district? A lot of things like that. And you're buying a community as much as you're buying a property, right? And this is especially important if you're an investor. Now, a lot of times you're just going to buy what is the best deal. But if you can get it in a community that makes sense, that would be great. And, that's kind of what we did. We bought, if I need to go to any doctor, whether it's my general doctor or specialty doctor, I'm within 5 to 10 minute drive. If I need to go to the grocery store, 2 to 5 minutes. If I want to go to the movies, 5 minutes, right? We are 20 minutes from Folsom, 20 minutes from downtown, 20 minutes from Roseville, right? 30 minutes from Elk Grove. Now, granted, that's most of Sacramento, but, we positioned ourselves to be in a place where we would be comfortable. And if we did want to rent, we are in a great community to do so. And so location is so important, definitely something to consider. I don't think enough people do, but obviously you need to be a little bit flexible, right? Some people are like, well, I only want to live in this one area. And I'm like, that's great. I hope that something comes up, but if it doesn't, I hope you have time to wait, because that's the way it is, right? Especially right now, there's not a lot of houses on the market, and that leaves us in a place where you gotta really be patient. That's very important. Be patient. We're gonna find you what we can, and hopefully something will come up, right? So definitely something to consider. All right. And so the last thing that we kind of want to go over that I just want people to kind of have in their mind, this is maybe geared a little bit more towards sellers, but price your houses correctly, right? Make it easier on yourself, make it easier on your buyer. And yes, when I say that, that doesn't mean that, there's not times, and there were, like, last year and the year before, when houses were going for $50,000 over asking and $100,000 over asking. There's a big shift in migration. You price it accordingly to that market. But what I'm saying is, if all the comps, if your realtor is saying, if their broker is saying, if the lender is saying that your property is between 300 and 350 or 600 and 650, and you want to list it for 700,000, you're wasting everybody's time. You're wasting your time, you're wasting seller's time, you're wasting your realtor's time. And a lot of realtors will still take these deals, right? Because they need the money or whatever it is, and they're going to spend 6 months wasting their time. And in that time, property value will drop more or whatever it is. Just be realistic. I know we care about these properties. I know that we want to get the most that we can, but ultimately you need to put it what it's actually worth. And so price them right. It'll sell. If you price it right, these properties will sell. Where people want to buy real estate. There's a shortage of houses. Do the other things that I said in this list, price the house right, and it will sell. And on the other end, don't put in offers on houses that are like super overpriced, because you're already asking for problems, right? Clearly, they are not living in a world of reality, and it's just going to be a big hassle back and forth. And so keep that in mind. It's best for everybody. I would say most realtors are competent enough to price houses relatively correctly. And guess what? The appraisal will adjust everything anyway, right? If you bid 400, or that's the offer you put in, and the house comes back at 380, almost always the seller's going to lower the purchase price to 380, because then it's just going to have to go back on the market. You're going to have to start it over, and nobody's going to offer over what the appraisal value is anyway, unless we're in a crazy demanding market or it's a crazy amazing house that somebody wants, right? Typically, it's just going to go down to what the appraisal value is anyway. And so understand that, work with your realtor, work with your loan officer, and get that right. So I know that's kind of, maybe is a little bit random, some stuff that's out there, but it's just some stuff that's been on my mind. And I thought, hey, we're taking a best step back in. I'm going to dip my toe into that water. Although I'm more of a jumper into the water. I like to dip my toe in, but same idea, right? A couple things that you should know about real estate. Next week, we'll be back to our regular program. We'll have our guest on, and I'm very excited to be able to get back to the format that I really enjoy, which is talking to people about real estate, home loans, and the general, market that's around this, and trying to help people understand what's going on and provide some cool stories, right? Listen to these people and their stories and hopefully apply and learn some stuff to you. So, thank you guys for being on. As always, this is the Hard Money Show where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. You guys have a good one.